This is episode 396 of the Foreign Policy Focus podcast. Got some good news on today's show, and that is National Security Advisor Arch Warhawk John Bolton has been fired. So I'll be talking a lot about Bolton and his legacy on today's show. Please take the time to share the show. You find it online at thelibertarianinstitute.org. Go to the right-hand column of the homepage there. You'll find the daily news roundup, which I write, and then the show, Foreign Policy Focus, which I put out, all in the right-hand column, like I said, on the homepage of the Libertarian Institute. So help the show out by sharing it, and then if you want to donate to the show, you do that at patreon.com/foreignpolicyfocus. Alright, so Donald Trump said in a tweet that he no longer required the services of John Bolton, which, you know, I think going back to the days of The Apprentice, Donald Trump was known for saying you're fired in that way, and I wish he would have done that, because it just would have cracked me up, and I really would have enjoyed for this to have been as humiliating as possible for John Bolton. I guess it was only kind of humiliating, as he was supposed to have a press conference just before the firing happened. Then Donald Trump said it on Twitter, which, has been somewhat characteristic in his administration, with people apparently finding out that they're being fired, even though, there's a lot of reporting surrounding it, but the actual announcement by Trump coming on Twitter. His tweet specifically pointed out that he had a lot of disagreements, and other members of his administration has had a lot of disagreements with John Bolton. From all the reporting, Bolton always puts forward the most hawkish positions as possible. And, from some of the plays that he made in the White House, as far as trying to change up personnel, how he was apparently receiving daily briefings that, are supposed to go to the president on intelligence and stuff like that. He was really trying to kind of Dick Cheney the Trump White House and create a flow of information to Donald Trump that would help lead the president to choose more hawkish war options, especially when it came to North Korea, Venezuela, and Iran. As far as the many disagreements go, there has been some reporting lately, and I believe even Mark Perry said this as well, that Mike Pompeo and John Bolton were not getting along and having a lot of disagreements. And I guess that John Bolton was the more hawkish figure in that clash, although, that certainly doesn't make Mike Pompeo a dove or anything. So for now, I think that's about all we know of the politics of this firing as far as to exactly why or what disagreement it was that finally got Donald Trump to tell John Bolton your services are no longer needed. There, have been reports that there's differences between Pompeo, who I guess was on board with Trump's, talks with the Taliban, even though it doesn't look like they're going to amount to anything now, whereas Bolton was not in favor of talking with the Taliban. The big question now, of course, is who's going to replace Bolton. When you look at it, as much as it's good news that John Bolton has been fired, there is potential bad news here. People have talked about Brian Hook, the U.S.-Iran envoy. They're always talking about possibly Nikki Haley or Tom Cotton re-entering the administration as some form on the foreign policy team. But there is, one good news suggestion that's been kicked around, and that is Colonel Douglas McGregor, who's often on the Tucker Carlson program, and typically has a very anti-war point of view. I don't know if, he's 100% anti-war on all issues, but he certainly understands a lot of what's gone on in the terror wars and can articulate very well why they won't work, and further U.S. intervention would only make, the countries more dangerous for the people that live there, but also unsafe for the American people. And, I think that's the message that Donald Trump really needs to hear, and it seems that he probably already listens and is pretty familiar with Douglas McGregor because, we know that the president's a fan of Tucker Carlson. And so, it's probably not great situation always to have, Fox News hosts, guests, being the ones that are informing the president, but, this is, I guess, what you hope for with Donald Trump, is that unlike Hillary Clinton, who would probably never hire somebody like Douglas McGregor or anybody with those, less interventionist tendencies, to the minimum amount that McGregor is, whereas Trump may just go that way because he watches Tucker Carlson, and wouldn't that be great for the rest of us? To talk about Bolton's legacy, especially in the Trump administration, the big one, I think, is the INF Treaty, and it just adds to Bolton's legacy of destroying nuclear agreements. And so while, he already agreed with Donald Trump, and Mike Pompeo already agreed with Donald Trump about killing the Iran deal, and so that one, well, I'm sure Bolton had a role to some extent in the U.S. leaving that and reapplying sanctions against Iran. That may have happened anyways. But getting out of the INF Treaty, maybe Trump has some more reasonable people around him. He could choose to go a different direction on that. I don't think he's necessarily ideologically for a new arms race with Russia. Bolton has a history of getting out of these kind of, arms deals. We look at the anti-ballistic missile treaty and then the agreed framework with North Korea as other examples of, Bolton killing off arms agreements. I'm not sure why Bolton hates arms agreements so much, but I'm sure for him they're an obstacle. They really are things that help prevent war from breaking out, establishing something that doesn't allow propaganda to spiral out of control and people to be whipped up into a fervor for war. This was, the problem with the Iran nuclear deal was that the IAEA, the international watchdog for nuclear weapons, were able to time and time again say, no, Iran isn't working on a nuclear weapon. And yes, we feel comfortable saying that 100% Iran is not secretly building the program anywhere. We know that. We know this country in a whole is not building nuclear weapons. And, that's the kind of propaganda that somebody like John Bolton would need to start a war with Iran. So it's no surprise that he would oppose these kind of agreements. When it comes to North Korea, John Bolton has a history of destroying nuclear deals with that country. I talked about the agreed framework, which was destroyed in the early Bush years, George W. Bush. Was agreed to, I believe, under the Clinton administration. It was essentially some kind of safeguards and subsidy deal where in exchange for North Korea pursuing a nuclear weapons program, they would agree to additional sanctions, inspections, not sanctions, and limits on their civilian energy program. In exchange, they were supposed to get some kind of fuel aid from different places, and I believe the U.S. was supposed to build them a couple nuclear reactors that are far harder to take the, results of that nuclear reaction and use it in any kind of nuclear weapon. But this time it was February of 2019 under the Trump administration, where apparently there was a deal that, I don't know if it was on the table, if it's fair to use that, but a deal had been kicked around between the United States and North Korea that would eventually possibly lead to the denuclearization of North Korea, but would essentially get them to kind of freeze their current program, and the U.S. would start to repeal sanctions against North Korea as North Korea gave out different parts and pieces of their weapons programs. And then at the agreement, I guess at Singapore, John Bolton talked Donald Trump into going in and telling the North Koreans, here's the deal I'm willing to give you. You give up all of your weapons of mass destruction programs up front, and then we will relieve sanctions, which obviously the North Koreans were never going to agree to. We've talked about in the show in the past about, Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, Libya and Iraq there as perfect examples of why somebody won't give up their nuclear weapons program to the United States in exchange for any kind of sanctions relief. And of course, for the North Koreans, they have the agreed framework in their own history and the Iran nuclear deal in the very recent history as examples of the U.S. going back on deals after countries have already either limited or given up, concessions within the deal, and the Americans back out and really don't give up anything ever. Now, even though John Bolton did mess up the Singapore summit, Donald Trump had the DMZ meeting, which Bolton was sidelined for, and we talked a lot about on the show at that time how that could possibly mean the guy was on his way out and how he was less influential, which, may be the case now that he's getting fired. Maybe it's been a long time coming, but even though John Bolton didn't attend, that meeting was never able to amount to much because of, I think, other halts within the Trump administration and war games that the U.S. started right after with South Korea that simulated the occupation of a conquered North Korea. Now that John Bolton is out, well, I guess I shouldn't phrase it that way. The North Koreans said that they are willing to start talks with the United States at the end of September, so hopefully that will happen. I'm guessing that the North Koreans didn't have insider information ahead of time that John Bolton was going to get fired, and so maybe they were just relying on the fact that Donald Trump said, John Bolton wouldn't lead the delegation as they, said they're not going to work with, I believe, Bolton and Pompeo anymore. But, they said they would resume those talks, and with Bolton now being fired, it does seem like, a sign that maybe things could move in the right direction. And let's hope that as a national security advisor, Donald Trump hits somebody who's interested in, working on an actual agreement with North Korea that, absolutely takes war off the table. I talked briefly about the Iran nuclear deal, how, they agreed on it in the Trump administration, but I'm sure, John Bolton has been involved in, pushing the economic war against Iran. It was documented how he traveled to the UK with intelligence before the UK territory, Gibraltar, seized an Iranian cargo ship heading into the Mediterranean Sea in the international shipping lane, an illegal act. So, Bolton's obviously had some influence on the Iran policy, making it worse, taking it in the wrong direction. Last up, I want to just mention Venezuela because, this was something that I don't even know was really on the table before, but suddenly John Bolton becomes National Security Advisor, and the U.S. starts an economic war against Venezuela. Under the Bolton time as National Security Advisor, Elliot Abrams, war criminal from previous Latin American interventions, is somehow appointed as like the U.S. envoy to Venezuela, and just all the havoc that's been wreaked in that country by the U.S. intervention there, and, our support for people in Venezuela like Juan Guaido that doesn't have enough following to become president, fueling protest movements that are only leading to more violence and conflict in that country. And of course other, big publicity ads like the concert, the benefit concert and the AIDS that was supposed to cross the border into Venezuela, the trucks being set on fire, and all the hysteria to try to create more war off of what was really a nothing event. So that's who John Bolton is, just somebody who tries to find every opportunity he could to look for a new war. It's very interesting, and I guess maybe in John Bolton's mind, this is how we keep people safe, that you have to stir up enough hatred in America for somebody like the Ayatollah or Maduro, that they go in and they destroy this world leader who's not compliant with the whims of the American empire at all times. And he really believes it's making Americans, less safe, but at the end of the day, he's just made us, less safe by all the wars he's created, not the wars he hasn't. Alright, some other stuff I want to talk about on today's show. The Department of Homeland Security is going to begin collecting more information on immigrants and refugees to the United States. The information is going to include social media accounts. Now, in all the press releases, they've been, kind of careful to say, these programs are optional or voluntary, but what that really means is that you go to the bottom of the line, the back of the line, the bottom of the list, if you don't agree to give up all of your social media information. And as we've seen recently from a 17-year-old incoming freshman to Harvard, a young man who didn't really have any political activism on social media whatsoever, that the U.S. immigration enforcement expelled him from the country because of things that people he is, friends with on social media, and however loose you want possibly to define that term. Maybe you accept a friend request from some girl you're interested in's brother or something like that because you're trying to look good in front of her, don't want to upset her for anything stupid like that. And then this guy posts some more radical stuff, but whatever, you're gonna ignore it or just kind of mute him on your Facebook feed. Then, the U.S. immigration enforcement comes in and they scroll and they find this guy posting probably things just like Free Palestine or something like that, and that's enough to get you booted out of the country. And so, there's a real danger here, and it is something people should be aware of. And of course, so many of these people who are coming to the United States are one way or another a victim of the empire's policies, whether it's, the IMF and U.S. financial gangsterism, economic wars, actual wars, the war on drugs, all the things the U.S. does around the world to make other people less prosperous and less safe. Right, interesting article in Defense One I'll link to in the show notes page, but it's about how 70% of Americans believe arms sales make us less safe. And so I guess Americans are getting the picture that the Saudis and the Emiratis and I mean, I guess probably to a lesser extent, but somewhat, maybe an ally like Israel, are not really allies of the American people. We don't have similar objectives and goals, and the things that the, Saudi royal family or the Bibi Netanyahu administration want to do in Israel are not the same things that make Americans better off. And so, we can't be selling weapons to these places because they're going to use them in a way that are bad for Americans. And apparently the American people realize that. Now, hopefully this is something that, Democratic candidates could really jump on and say, oh wow, 70% of Americans don't support these arms sales, and Trump has really made it a big point of his administration about how many jobs are created and how good these arms sales are for the United States. And there's some really good documented evidence out now about how these arms sales don't create jobs. I think it would be an easy win for any of these Democratic candidates, maybe other than Joe Biden, who's so supportive of the war state in his past, to say to, Donald Trump or, just the American people in general, I am going to be very careful about who I sell weapons to, and I'm going to evaluate every weapon sale, on the security needs of the American people, rather than on if it creates jobs in America, at a few places like Lockheed Martin, which it actually doesn't end up doing a whole lot. It just enriches the executives there. And so that could be a way that we at least reduce some arms sales. I mean, the better statement would just be somebody coming out and saying that, hell no, if these are American tax dollar, researched weapons, that they're not going to be sold to anybody but the American military. And hopefully even then to a lesser extent than current. Some other big headline news is that Hezbollah downed an Israeli drone. Now this, is the headline that gets shared everywhere, and so it sounds like that the Iranians are coordinating with Hezbollah to act aggressively against Israel. Well, the drone was in Lebanese airspace, so, that is the territory that Hezbollah protects, and it's not surprising at all that they shot down that drone, especially in recent weeks. Israel has used drones to attack, suburban Beirut. Israel apparently also bombed a Syrian army camp being built in southwestern Syria. I read some analysis that says that Israel is becoming a little bit more limited in where they could strike in Syria, and that they're now forced to strike a little bit more around the edges, or as we've seen, even hit targets within Iraq, rather than being able to hit them in Syria. Alright, Friday's show, I'm going to cover the whole 9/11, kind of because that's going to be coming out, coming up the anniversary there, the 18th now. The day I'm releasing this show. So I'm going to record a show on, the anniversary, and that's going to include a lot of stuff about Afghanistan. But Trump said the peace deal is now dead, and, it seems like, this is something I talked about when the peace talks are starting. The one sticking point would be is the Taliban said that the Americans have to leave, before that they're going to give up the fight or negotiate with the Afghan government. And it always seemed, unlikely to me that the Americans were actually planning on leaving the Bagram Air Base. And, I had optimism there for a while that maybe some kind of deal was eventually going to be worked out, or at least a real big reduction in U.S. troops. I guess Trump said he wouldn't rule out reducing the number of U.S. troops in Afghanistan. But remember, he increased the number at the start of his administration. So now for 2020, we're, looking at the first term of the Trump administration, hopefully just getting back to the 8,000 or so troops Obama had in that country. Last up on today's show, I just want to update the story of the Rohingya people. It was late summer of 2017 that ethnic cleansing campaign started by the Myanmar military against a Muslim minority of people known as the Rohingya. 700,000 plus were pushed into Bangladesh. 1,000 or so were killed as it happened. Video surfaced of the burning of Rohingya villages, and in a very real sense, this was an ethnic cleansing campaign. They were pushed out of the country into another one. Since then, the Rohingya people have been living in camps in Bangladesh, and it doesn't seem like it's been going well. There was a cholera outbreak at one time. I've read stories about people being trampled to death by elephants, that there's been some gangster problems within these refugee camps, and this resulting in people dying. So it doesn't sound like a pleasant place to live, but at the same time the people are terrified and refusing to return to Myanmar. Now, the BBC traveled to Myanmar and had a trip with the government around, and they apparently got their hands on some satellite footage and showed that a lot of these camps that the Rohingya people will be returning to Myanmar are places where their villages has been destroyed, and now these government security camps are built on top of it. And so, I'm sure that's another reason that these people do not want to return. I don't know this region well enough to know the solution to this whole problem, which is why, the U.S. should never intervene in a situation like this, and, the whole humanitarian intervention doctrine is so flawed. Alright everyone, that's where we're on the show. Foreign Policy Focus, .libsyn.com is the website for the show, but, always go to libertarianinstitute.org first, and that way you could check out the daily news roundup and the show. Foreign Policy Focus is on Patreon. $5 a month will get you into the monthly live stream, and I have a Facebook group, titled Foreign Policy Focus. Thanks everyone.